What's good, everybody? Welcome to another exciting episode of Full Circle. I'm your host, as always, older Harmon Jr. Please feel free to find me at older Harmon Jr. on all your favorite social media. So, people, another exciting episode, as always. But I have an industry favorite today. So today is a very special episode. I mean, this guy is known around the globe. He's called a news expert, I believe. Expert on what's going on in the game industry. Like, I mean, some will say, is he better than Wario 64? No, actually, no. The question is that no. I'm sorry.
No,
Jeff, you were
not.
Great, but I'm
I
sure that guy doesn't even exist.
Dare. Yes, I would not even dare.
But Jeff, thank you so much. I'm so happy and excited for you to be on the show. And just in case, Jeff, by a small chance, if people don't know who you are you and what do you do?
Oh, please. Well, thank you for that really nice introduction. I really appreciate that. I'm Jeff Grub. I write about video games over at gamesbeat.com. I do a show called Grub Snacks over on Giant Bomb where I contribute, and I'm in a bunch of other places, but mostly people might know me from either my news stories on GamesBeat or tweeting about games, where a lot of stuff tends to go viral or whatever. Or you might hear, or you might, if you're ever on like a gaming leaks and rumors subreddit or stuff or something, whatever. My picture apparently has just been added to their banner there because I try to talk about a lot of stuff that's happening, that's coming up. Try to talk about news and what's going, like things that people want to know about. There's an audience out there that is very thirsty to want to know what's going to happen next in video games, and I'm trying to serve that audience as best I can, while also walking that fine line of trying to respect the developers to a certain extent. Sometimes that goes wrong because I don't write for the developers, I write for my audience. But for the most part, I'm like, hey, they worked hard on this. I understand that. I try to walk that fine line. It doesn't usually work out, but yeah, that's me. That's what I do, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
Oh, that's what's up. On the media side of things, it's always hard because you never, we talked about this on a previous show, but when someone creates art, no one ever wants it to be bad. Is the short, right. Is the long end of that stick. But at the end of the day, art is meant to be critiqued and will always forever be. It's the nature of art. So unfortunately, even Van Gogh, Leonardo, all the great Renaissance artists, at some point people thought their work was crap, and then they died, and then it was wonderful. Unfortunate for them, but it's just the nature of the beast. It's never personal.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's
absolutely.
Never,
yeah. And the thing I've learned over time is, developers mostly know that, and they're mostly really good about it. Like even like I also do reviews, and I've written some reviews that I thought were harsh but fair and that sort of thing. And the developers are almost always like, thank you. You know what it is? They know their game better than anyone. So when a games journalist comes along or a game critic comes along and writes a critique of it, the developer's like, yeah, we know. We were just hoping you wouldn't mind so much. And we happen to get it reviewed by the one person who happens to mind. And so usually when you get like, people who are upset about that sort of thing, it's fans who are polling for their favorite console or whatever. And that's pretty easy to ignore because you're like, that's mostly just kids or people who they're feeling anxious about buying consoles or whatever, and they don't want to have to buy another one because they just spent $500 on this one, so they're hoping they made the right bet. And you try to give them a little bit of leeway and say, I get it, I understand what you're doing, and then just move on, just mute them and move on. So for the most part, I'm talking like, I get all kinds of hatred. For the most part, no, most people are really nice. Everyone seems to like get where I'm coming from, and it's a lot of mutual respect out there, and that's what I dig.
That's what's up. And remember, people on the flip side of that coin, people will also hate, masterpieces. I still see the people who are like, Breath of the Wild is a bad game. I'm like, bro, you're entitled to that horrible opinion.
Horrible.
But luckily today, you'll get to hear all our wonderful and maybe horrible opinions, because we're talking about Batman. In case you didn't know, people, Batman Day has just happened as a recording. Whenever you're hearing this, we're within the week, the Batman Day week. And we're going to be talking about Batman games, how far they've come, because Batman is one of the few franchises that has a extremely long breadth in video games. There's so much. And, recently, a lot of huge success in that franchise, and Gotham Knights is going to try to capitalize on that. But before that, we're going to be talking about video game restrictions and addictions. Yes, if you haven't heard, China broke the internet kind of with its news that, if you're under 18, you're only playing 2 hours of video games a week, something to that effect. And that sounds insane. But on the other side of that coin, U.S. addiction with video games and kids have never been higher. So that's a tale of two stories right there. But before all that, we're going to be talking Splitgate. If you don't know what Splitgate is, its tagline is Halo with portals. And, I mean, it's pretty accurate. It is Halo-like gameplay with Spartan-like people shooting portals everywhere. And this game is seeking to capitalize on its current popularity and promising things like it'll have Forge faster than Halo Infinite and will have modes be better, etc., etc., etc. And Jeff, so I first played Splitgate back in 2018, I believe, when it first went to beta. I remember I saw it at one of the PAXs, and then it was like open beta. And, you know, I remember thinking like, this is classic Halo multiplayer, and it doesn't shy away from that at all. And, you know, similar to Ark, it's one of those games that's been out, but technically hasn't been out. I don't know how Ark has a sequel, yet hasn't released yet, whatever. And, you know, I was thinking this is currently filling a void. But do you think a game like this could be successful once Halo actually indeed comes out, assuming it actually comes out the end of this year?
Yeah, but it's people just need to understand what success can mean in video games. There were like a lot of numbers thrown around like in the early days of, I guess not like the peak of Halo or the peak of Call of Duty, where you would get online on the game and it would say something like, oh, 1 million people are playing concurrently right now or something like that, and that was every night. That's not really how most games go. It's not even how those games really went. What you're looking for is you want to get a sustainable audience that comes back regularly, that gives you a chance to grow. So if someone else comes in, they find that there's enough people playing that they have a chance to match up pretty well and get better and have a good time. And that number is around 10,000, active concurrent players when you go on Steam. And if you see that number around, hovering around 5,000 to 15,000, that's a healthy, strong game that can monetize and succeed over the long term. Now, Splitgate is in a situation where it's probably going to be able to nail that pretty easily. But it is also from a developer that's taking quite a lot of funding. There's a lot of faith in this game to kind of get to that next level, to be something that is mentioned alongside something like Counter-Strike and Apex Legends and all these other really massive games. So it might have to get to that next tier, and that would be around having 2-3 years of sustained 20 to 30,000 concurrent players like every day or something like that, peak concurrence. And that's going to be a little bit tougher if Halo Infinite comes along and Halo Infinite is really good, and Halo Infinite's also that game is free to play, so people are going to try that game. And if that sort of snowballs where friends are like, hey, we want to go play a game together, what could we play? Well, we could all go play Halo Infinite right now. That's the kind of thing that could take a lot of attention away from something like Splitgate. Now, my hunch here is that Splitgate is going to continue to find its own audience. I think there's going to be a lot of younger players who are going to come in and say, hey, I don't really have this affinity for Halo. It's been in a weird place for a few years. I'm going to go get into this new thing and build up my own relationship with this new thing. And it's also different. It's even more complicated. There's more stuff going on. And as someone who's been grown up playing shooters my entire life, now that I'm like a teenager and I have a lot of free time, Splitgate really scratches that itch. And I think it's going to be just fine. It's probably not going to have similar numbers to Halo, though, going forward. So a success, yes. Is it going to be the world beater? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I easily agree with that opinion. But what I find interesting is, what kind of success or damage do these things find when they compare it? So clearly Splitgate doesn't shy away from Halo. And if they didn't make the comparison, the community most definitely would have. And what I find interesting is because I've always said that, Halo Infinite is a game that cannot fail. I'm not saying that it's not fail. I'm just saying if it fails on any front, that is a huge blow to, the Halo brand and Microsoft as a whole. Yes. And what I think was interesting is because I feel like its success or lack thereof will have a great impact on Splitgate, because I don't know how familiar you are with the game Tim that was coming on Steam. It's a Pokemon clone, essentially. Yeah. But they never played into that. They were just like, clearly this is Pokemon inspired. It's on Steam. Eventually we're in beta and get to release. But because of the wildest thing I still think to gaming in one of the past decade is Pokemon having a huge controversy over the National Dex thing, and that took off in ways I never imagined. But because of the hate which I believe was unjustified, that the game got people, people rallied to Tim. They championed it, being like,
Right.
oh, Pokemon's betrayed us. Well, look at this Pokemon-like thing. Unfortunately, no, Tim didn't become the Pokemon killer people wanted it to be, or some
No.
some voices of the internet, which I'm like, bro, it's the biggest IP
never-
on the planet.
It was never
Literally
gonna happen,
nothing
right, yeah.
is going to stop it. But so I was thinking in similar fashion, like, you know, it would be an interesting story. Let's say Halo Infinite releases and somehow the multiplayer is bad. I don't think a universe exists where that happens, but it is.
Right.
You know, maybe the story is upsetting, like, you know, the multiplayer is good. And I will be interested to see how the community react, to be like, well, since Halo has betrayed us, here's Splitgate. Or like, for example, I was thinking, you know, we're in delay season. We all know that. So God forbid Halo Infinite is delayed. I feel like that would skyrocket Splitgate's like possibility to be, you know, to that apex level, like you said.
Yeah, I think it's well positioned to capitalize on specifically any missteps by Halo. You're absolutely right about that. You know, indie darlings are, you know, they're called that for a reason. They're really easy to champion. You can get behind them and like. It makes it feel like you're part of the team, like promoting this game, and it's not that it's coming from a giant corporation. Yeah, it's very easy to like argue on a game's behalf when it comes from that scale, and that game is that's exactly where it's at. You know, it's had its own fair share of issues though, where you know it's had server problems where it's really struggling to get people online. It's had server queues. The game runs at a pretty low resolution on the modern consoles. They're going to update it here pretty soon, but we'll see how that goes. They're in a situation where like they got a lot of money. Now they're just like trying to like find people to work on this game to get it to where it needs to be. And so, you know, there's always the chance that while Halo might be having a misstep, this game's not actually physically ready to capitalize on it, and that could be a problem. But they're slowly working toward that, and I still think overall it's pretty well positioned. I just think also that I agree with your initial assessment that there's probably little chance that Halo Infinite multiplayer is going to come out and people are going to be really upset about something. I think they're going to nail that, but that's more a hunch based on what we played from that early technical preview, and then based on the response to that from a lot of Halo fans that I know being like, I'm in love with this. So yeah, I think probably these games are just going to have to coexist in a way that is going to be fine for both. It just means that Splitgate probably won't get that chance to capitalize on a misstep that we're hypothesizing about.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because both these games are telling stories that are currently true for big AAA, you know, games like Halo, and smaller you know, live service games that I mentioned Arc earlier, but we were starting to see more and more games that are technically, we're playing and funding the development as the game is out.
Yes.
And it seems weird to me that that is our current society in games. Either a game, we're going to know about a game for, I mean, I understand, I get it, but, you know, as a pure gamer and fan, it's annoying that, cool, I first heard about this game 7 years ago, a decade ago, and it gets to something like, I think Beyond Good and Evil 2, where like, I'll probably never play this game. So now I have this weird void. Or I know I will play this game, but it's just going to be such a drip fed of trailers, updates, and data. And, you know, especially after something like Cyberpunk 2077, more developers are not going to be willing to take that risk of even risking pushing anything that's not done. So I'm like, it's weird to, you know, live in this world where either we're going to get a game 10 years out from when we know about it in these small updates, or we're basically going to be playing a unfinished game that we play and basically work until completion. And I don't know how we got here. I don't know if that's just the times, or
it's hard. Making games is hard is how we got here. It's super difficult. It's expensive. It takes a lot of skill that is in high demand and hard to come by. And so a lot of people who are working on these games are often learning their positions on the job, learning what works. And that, you know, that's why like every live service game does come out and seems to step on its own toes for the first year. Because even though, you know, you see Destiny do it and everyone saw Destiny do it, every game since has pretty much also done the same things, because solving those problems requires a lot of time and a lot of experience, and we are still in this weird time where most people working on these giant games haven't had that exact experience. So the early access is a solution that isn't perfect, but it is the kind of thing where it has a lot of upside, where you could charge a little bit less, you only get the diehard in there, people who will build a relationship with the game. And then on the player side, the benefit is you do get to have this relationship with the game where you get to see how it changes, and you get to say, I was there when it was this weird thing, and there was that weird bug for a while, and yet we all kept playing around it and incorporating it into our stuff, and maybe that inspires some other feature, and now I know what this feature like originally was. And all that storytelling that we do as gamers is something that's really benefits from something like early access. So while it's not ideal, for the most part, it's actually a really elegant solution, because if you don't want it, you just ignore it and you wait for the game to go 1.0. And if you do want it, it's there waiting for you. And then it helps the developers actually figure out what their game can and should be. The other side of that, of announcing a game super early, is just a reality of, it's something like Beyond Good and Evil 2. Who knows why? They probably announced it as part of like trying to fight off Vivendi, trying to take over the company, and they thought like one more big game announcement that got people buzzing might help the stock price go just that much higher, make us that much more difficult to acquire. It's like that sort of strategic thinking. So we end up with this announcement of a game that who knows if that ever actually comes out. I would probably say probably not at this point personally, but it is weird. It is weird, but the fundamental reason why we are in this situation is because these games are just so hard to make, and they're not going to get any easier. So we're probably going to be in this for quite some time.
Yeah, most definitely. What I do enjoy, at least I personally enjoy, is because of the trends and things, and the difficulty, everything you just elaborated on, is now we live in what I'm dubbing the Mandela effect era of gaming. If I had to call this era of gaming, it would be the Mandela effect, because you look at something like Hades, where people legit are confused. When did this game actually come out? Like, I've seen people be like, this is my 2021 game of the year. Oh, wait, no, this game released in 2020. Yeah, because it actually won game of the year. But I played early. Wait, what? And, we end up with like, Hades could theoretically be someone's favorite game of 2019, 2020, 2021, and they are all correct.
Yeah, everyone's right. Exactly. And it was early access on Epic in 2019. Then it came out to Steam and Switch as a 1.0 in 2020. And then it finally got ported to Xbox and PlayStation in 2021. So yeah, it's like if you're on one of those platforms and that's where you played it for the first time, it's absolutely like when it came out for you. And you see that. Like, I remember having conversations around Returnal's release, and I'm like making a lot of comparisons to Hades, because it's like that was the big roguelite that had just come out, the year before, that it was my number 1 or number 2 game of the year before. And I'm just like, this is how you do it. Every run feels different, and making all these comparisons, I think, makes so much sense. And I think it kind of makes Returnal look like a good game, but not a great game, because it's not matching what Hades is doing. And then so much of the response to that was just like, that's not a comparison. Hades is like some 2D game, and it was so clear that they just hadn't played it. And then once the game finally came to PlayStation and Xbox, so much of that audience that was like having that conversation with me went on to play it, and they're like, oh man, Hades is a really good game. It's like kind of does some stuff better than Returnal. I'm like, oh my god, yes, please, yeah. And so it's like, we are often like, it's not just like everyone's right about when the game came out. It's often we are having different conversations, because we are all just coming at gaming from slightly different angles, so that it feels like a different industry to some people, and it's a really weird thing to have to contend with.
Yeah, and what I don't know, I don't want to say complicates, that's probably not the right word, but what makes this problem more interesting is that we are also in a time during this Mandela effect, which adds to it, is of re-releases and remasters and revamps, and sometimes even immediately. For example, I didn't play the original Persona 5. I played Persona 5 Royal. Mm-hmm. And but it's different enough where it's a new game, a new experience, especially if you didn't experience the first one. So it's like, wait, so can I even call this the same game? It's so wildly, it's so much more than DLC. And then and then we get all these from Resident Evils to, like, especially when they do things like, I remember when Ratchet and Clank the remake came out, and it was just called Ratchet and Clank, and it tied into the movie. And I remember thinking, should I get it? Is this a remaster, or is this a different game? And I play it, and I'm like, okay, this is basically a different game at this point, and and it's like, man, I don't. It's having a conversation about games now is just so interesting because it's almost like,
Yeah.
oh, I played Resident Evil 1. No, not the original, the remake.
Yeah.
And then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, and you, like you said, we're coming at from so different angles about games that are technically the same game, but they're not. Even, we always make fun of Grand Theft Auto 5, but I will give them this credit. You are never confused. It is just forever Grand Theft Auto 5. But with other games, you're like, yes, no. When did that come out?
Right. Yeah. The thing is, like, there's a new hardcore sort of person every day. There's someone who chooses like gaming as their favorite hobby for the rest of their life, and for that they're paying some amount of attention, or maybe they weren't paying any attention, but they play something and now it's their favorite thing in the world, and they look around, they go, oh man, people are having conversations like, wait, what's Mass Effect? What is Resident Evil? What are all these things? And you got to, like, that's what a lot of these remasters are capitalizing on. But it's also like makes it weird where, like, we try to have these conversations about all these long running franchises and realize that, the industry is growing so much and the audience is growing so fast that a lot of the time, if you talk about a game from 10, 15 years ago and you feel like everyone played it then, if you talk about it today and it hasn't had one of these remasters or remakes, there's a really strong chance that only a small fraction of today's gaming audience has actually touched it, and it's a problem for these publishers where they have to juggle and keep these things relevant, and they have to work hard to release stuff like remasters and remakes so that they can. I mean, that's what's happening with Knights of the Old Republic remake is. Lucasfilm and Disney are looking at this thing saying, hey, we have this thing that was really beloved. We want to keep it relevant because we are thinking about ways to continue to tell Star Wars stories. And we think the Knights of the Old Republic era and the High Republic era are going to be very important to that. So we need to get that game back out in the mainstream, because almost like, while it's discussed all the time as one of the best Star Wars games, most people today have not played it. So what do we do there? And it creates all these interesting, scenarios where we have these conversations and people just their experiences are so different. It's hard to actually find those common grounds. But I think in the long run, it's cool because it's also like really relevant to it's unique to gaming, where there are remakes of movies and stuff like that, but they're treated very differently than like the sort of the way we treat the canonical re-releases sometimes of these games. And so it's just, the software is getting updated to ensure that it can continue to exist, and it's really interesting and it's really difficult for these companies, but it's also ultimately really cool for all of us to kind of keep playing these games and keep them relevant in our lives.
Yeah, I know from a financial standpoint, this is not feasible. But I remember the Master Chief Collection really did an interesting thing about how they had the button where you can go from like, this is what the game was and this is what the game is now. And it would be so, I always thought like, man, I know this is not going to happen for obvious reasons. Like, this is just not something you can realistically do all the time.
You're right.
But I feel
It'd be
like
awesome.
Yeah, but I feel like certain games could have had it, because I told people when Mario 3D. Imagine if Mario 3D All Stars had a mode to where you went from polygon Mario 64 to basically a Mario 64 looking like something akin to Galaxy. Like, oh
Right.
man, I would have lost it. Like, it would have instantly been my game of the year somehow. And
I feel exactly the same.
yeah. And I'm going to ask you an interesting question, because anytime I see this online, the answers vary so wildly. And sometimes the answers are so concrete, but there's always just these exceptions to rules. Can we definitively count remakes, remasters, remixes, if you will, towards game of the year? Do they deserve to be part of the conversation at this point?
Yeah, it's tough. I was going to like ask you about this too, because I was going to be like, hey, do you think anyone's going to like make Mass Effect Legendary Edition their game of the year? And that's the one that's like on this weird bubble, because it's ultimately a remaster. It's not a full from the ground up remake. It's those same games with a new coat of paint, and yet it's also one of the best games to come out this year. So it's tough. I think that we like. we need to like recognize these games like in the way that they affect us personally when we are talking about our personal games of the year. And for me, those are the conversations, those are the lists that I find way more interesting than something like Jeff Keighley's The Game Awards, where it is like I vote on the Game Awards. I'm part of that like panel, and but ultimately it's just like something I do. I scribble down something for Jeff Keighley really quickly for nominations, send it to him, and then he sends back a list of things that got nominated, and then I spend 5 minutes filling that out and saying, okay, now this is what we think. When you have a conversation about like, okay, but no, what's really your favorite game of the year? That is way more interesting, way more revealing. You find way more stuff that you didn't know you cared about, or you find common ground with people that also play games, and that's where I think Mass Effect Legendary Edition is going to come up a lot this year. And yet, I also don't think that many of those people who would count it among their favorite games so far, in 2021, would submit it for an official Game of the Year award from a lot of publications or from something like the Game Awards. I think we probably at GamesBeat probably would not nominate Mass Effect Legendary Edition for the Game Awards, although we might consider it for our own personal awards. I don't know. I'd have to kind of talk with people and see what they think. It might be what probably ends up happening is you get a list of a lot of games and you're trying to make a list of 10 games or whatever, and someone says something like, well, Mass Effect Legendary Edition is just kind of a remaster of those same games. It already got its due. And then you say, okay, well, we'll cut it. And that's kind of how it goes. But when you're just talking to someone about their personal opinion, it's way more fascinating. And you find out why this game from many years ago is so much better to them than all this stuff that came out this year. And that's ultimately really revealing.
Yeah, and I agree completely. And I've said this for years, and people thought I was joking, but I'm going to breathe new life into this. The best remaster needs just a category, like best racing, best fighting, best sim, and I don't understand why none of the big outlets have done it, because I'm like, it just honestly needs its own category at this point. I don't see a year going forward where we don't have remasters of any games. Like, it's gonna take a good long while before I feel like we can go a full calendar year and not see a remaster of anything. Because if I'm being honest, my personal game, I never played Mass Effect the original time, so this is my first time playing it. And to your effect, how we have different conversations, I was like, how did people hate this ending? How did people hate this? And then people are like, oh, you didn't realize you were playing the DLC ending. Oh, these parts that made sense were DLC added after the fact. I'm like, oh, I didn't have that knowledge. I didn't, But still, I think it's an amazing game. I get it now. I drank the soup. I was like, I understand. How has no one ever made an RPG this great ever since then? Kudos. And but also on my list is gonna be Final Fantasy VII Intrigade. That's gonna be on my list. And I love Pokemon, and I know it. I just know it. Brilliant Diamond, Dazzling Pearl. It's probably gonna be on my It's just because of who I am as a person and gamer. So that's 3 out of my top 5 being games I didn't make. And then the next 2 slots are probably going to be like It Takes Two, because I can't think of the last time I had an amazing co-op game like that, so that it deserves a spot. And then, it'll probably be something obvious like, a Deathloop, a Far Cry 6, insert big, great game here, slot like the And but that'll be interesting. But I guess just to move the show forward, all these games take a tremendous amount of time. Like, you can't play it all. But now, with the new Chinese regulations that I mentioned at the top of the show, if you're under 18, you're a minor. Essentially, the government, through its means of they're limiting it to how long a minor can play video games, and it's something to 2 to 3 hours a week. And I mean, I know as a different country, it's a different world, but and I just want to say, since you have children, I don't have children, and because the story I always hear, video game addiction has always been a hot button topic, no matter where you fall on it. There is some truth to that. I don't think it's a problem sweeping the nation, but some people feel that way. And you think, a move out like this, China, like, how reasonable do you think it is? I mean, the time limit may be unreasonable for most people, because I'm like, bro, if you give me 2 hours a week to play a game, I'm doing nothing but like walking and talking to like 3 NPCs is what I feel like I can accomplish with that.
Yep. No, you're right. It's it is a different world. I think a big part of that is a lot of the games that are popular in China because they had a console ban for so long, and PC gaming was their one option. But now it's mobile gaming that's bigger than anything else. Although they definitely have a lot of PC gaming happening there, and even more, and console gaming is growing there now. But what the market that exists in China is a lot of gotcha mobile games that are designed to extract the maximum amount of money from players and to specifically prey on people who might be vulnerable to that. And so I still think that even in the face of that a regulation on to me, this is not necessarily about like, oh, protecting people who are vulnerable, because then you would go in there and you put more rules in how the games are actually crafted. This is more about old people being weirded out that kids like video games is more what this is. And while I appreciate when things exist to protect kids, it almost always is this weird I don't know, as a parent, for me, it's weird because I'm like, I can do that. I got it. Don't worry about it. I got that. I can handle this. I can tell my kids no, and I could get them off these things and put parental controls on these things. I can handle this stuff. And so, and there, it's pretty clear that what this is like, where this is coming from in China is like this sense that they want to get back to the good old days of the original feeling they had when they first started the Communist Party in China, which was, hey, we're this great nation of workers and everyone works real hard, and we all, we're all going to get super educated and bring everybody else up, and you got to cram and get really good at school. And if you are doing anything other than that, you might be someone who's a degenerate to society or something like that. And most people in China, I believe, do not think that way. But I think there are a few people in key positions in the government there, in the regulatory system, that thinks that, hey, we do want to go back to the good old days, and that's not something that is all that foreign, right? When we look at our government, those similar things happen all the time, maybe to different scales, but really, is it much? It is like the abortion regulation in Texas right now, where they're turning citizen against citizen. Is that all that different? That to me, that's worse than what they're doing with gaming in China. So it's like it's hard to point at another country and say the way you're doing things is wrong, and yet it weirds me out. I think it's a bad policy. I think it's a reactionary policy, and one that ultimately is bound to fail and be repealed, and in a few years kind of look back at like, man, what were we thinking? And the reality is that the way they're enforcing this is Chinese developers have to put these procedures into their games themselves to ensure kids have to sign in and prove who they are, maybe show an ID to a webcam or something like that. But there is a huge gray market for games that exists. Like you could just download Steam, use a VPN, and get all the games you want and play them as much as you want. So my big thing here is this sort of regulation almost never works all that well. And if your concern is gaming addiction, the answer is almost always education and programs to help people recognize the problems and stuff like that, and invest in that stuff, and instead of just putting harsh barriers around people and saying, this is how you can exist in this entertainment space. And so, yeah, really, I think what China's doing here is not really caring about the kids all that much more concerned about the appearance of the party and the country to outsiders and to like what they think a good Chinese citizen should be. And that's right now not someone who plays video games and doesn't watch like a lot of like interesting movies. Like they have laws coming up now against movies starring effeminate males, and it's like, okay, what the hell?
I wasn't gonna get into that, but yes, that's even games, and this includes games as well. The effeminate male thing, I'm just like, man.
I'm like, that's just like, that's, and I made this point on one of my podcasts. That's like, that's not going to affect, like, you're not going to make fewer games with effeminate males. Like that stuff happens because it's like it's cultural and it's really powerful, and people, they go to that because that's what they've grown up with, and that's what they see as like, you know, the star of a Japanese art like role playing game or something like that, who might have long hair or something, or like soft pretty looks or something like that. It's just what they grew up with. It's their culture, and it's way too powerful. Japan's not going to stop making those games because China has some weird new rule about it. So and then the people in China that want to find those games are going to find those games. So to me, this is just continues to look like older people in China getting anxious about the way the culture is changing and overreacting. And if that's what this is, it's bound to fail.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with most of everything you just said there, and I think China's interesting in the sense that, so you know, when we grew up, how many games released over the course of a year? Like, maybe, you know, 10 to 15.
Couple hundred.
You know,
yeah, I mean, like 10 to 15 that we like knew, like that we heard about, and then like worldwide for every system, like 100 at most, maybe 200.
Yeah, and you know, half those games you don't know exist. Half those games don't even make it to the US. And if they do,
Right.
they're so hard to come by that they're not feasible to even play. You know, half of those, you know, back then most people didn't have PC. So yeah, you know, you had Quake and Doom, but you know, that was almost this super niche, you know, people. And even then, even at the end of the day, the average person probably only had, you know, 3 to 4 games, 5. Yes. I'm talking you're extra balling over the course of the year. So, you know, video game addiction was what people thought of more like the arcade scene. And I think China's an interesting case because, you know, said they finally, more for lack of a better term, opened the floodgates. And, you know, now they're seeing that. And, you know, it makes me think that, you know, what would the U.S., you know, look like if back in the heyday of video games, if we actually had, I think video games has been so popular, so part of the U.S. culture, whether you want to believe that or not, or acknowledge it more realistically, that, you know, we get to this point, and you know, the U.S., the way our country's set up, we can never ever truly try to regulate games. The government could like it would fail before it even got started.
Yeah. It would be like, regulating liquor and stuff like that. We have bootleg games everywhere and stuff. It'd be a hell of a thing.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, you know, as a parent, you know, like, what do you think now, like, for kids? Because for us, you know, we can be like, it's part of our career, so easily, it's an easy justify. I played 80 hours in 2 days. It was like, well, you know, it pays the bills. Who cares? But like, how do you go? Like, I couldn't imagine being a kid today. I just couldn't. With the you know. Me, I was like, I played Yoshi's Island and like that game, and you know, I had like a Mega Man X, and it was like, bro, that's probably like 8 months for me right there.
Yep.
For
sure. And it's not like kids today, they have Roblox and they go online and it's like endless content and they can make their own, and there's always new stuff coming out, and there's pressure to spend money to get stuff to look cool next to your friends, which is something we didn't have to deal with really in games when we were younger. It's the, you know, those social pressures are super powerful, and I could get parents looking around saying, please help me, but limiting kids to a couple hours a week is probably not the real answer there, at least not with having the government do it. That is an extreme overreaction. I agree. I would like to see, like, if we get to a point in America where we do become more comfortable with regulation again, like regulating private business, what that would look like in gaming. I think that a good start would be stuff like, you know, publishing much more information about the way free-to-play games work and where that money is going and how much like you've spent on a game. If it is a free-to-play game, like it's just a big number there up there in the top left that just says, hey, you've spent over $1,000 on this game. Do you realize that? Like that kind of stuff, I think would go a pretty long way towards putting stuff into perspective for people. And you know, that's the one thing the gaming industry is really kind of bad about. It's just being very secretive and sort of slippery about how it's manipulating you, and they spend a lot of money and time figuring out ways to manipulate people. So I understand a desire to have an agency push back against that stuff. Absolutely. It just probably doesn't look like the way China's doing it.
I am most definitely, and you know, we're not gonna get into Apple versus Epic, but I predict because of this going forward, because you know, I'm not saying gaming is lawless, but like you said, there's really, I'm not a legal expert, but you know, there's really a lot of this stuff is just uncharted territory. It's like is this, like back when the whole, is this gambling? It's a loot box gambling. Yes, no, maybe so. Well, if you don't spend no money on it, and then it's just, there's so many nuanced things that only exist in the world of gaming that like when it comes to classifying, regulating, protecting, whatever angle you want to take, that no one wants to go. And I think it's funny because the conversation always used to be, games make you violent. Oh, you're going to go,
right,
rob a bank and, slap a baby and, all this other stuff. And, that conversation never happens anymore. Now it's like, not saying those conversations weren't serious, but now they're serious in a different, unanswerable way. Like,
yes. That it's gaming is getting better at like handling its problems, but its problems are getting bigger and more complicated. Like but at the beginning, it was just like convincing adults that, oh, hey, you're gonna have to buy another system for your kid because it's been several years and we want better technology, so we're gonna move on to this thing. And that was like a pretty simple problem to solve. You just try to explain that to them. But now it's like, we are mentally manipulating your children to get them to spend money. And yeah, okay, so we're probably not going to talk about that. It's like, okay, these are big ethical issues now, and that's something that the industry is not, it doesn't feel very well equipped with handling, but it feels like it's also better at handling its problems than it ever was in the past. At the same time, it's a weird situation. Yeah. But yeah,
I'm gonna ask you a funny question because
please.
I assume you have non-gamer friends, non-gamer family, and they know what you do because they never know what you do.
Right.
And I always say when I get parents or just people curious and they ask me questions like, is this a good game for so-and-so or for me? And that question used to be so easy to answer. It'd be like, my child's 8. Do I get them Grand Theft Auto? No.
Yeah.
I'm like, my child's 8. Should they play Fortnite? I'm like, is it violent?
Yep.
No.
Nerf. Yeah.
I'm like, no, it's cartoony, but I mean, you can headshot somebody, but it's like, so they're killing. So I should rip this controller out their hand. This is what, and I'm like, oh god, no. And these questions, I'm like, they have so many answers, and not even from like the hardcore standpoint. Just like, can my child play this? How old's your child? 12. I mean, what has your child been exposed to? What is your level?
Right.
Because feasibly, I can be like, okay, Legend of Zelda is cool, but also he like stabs this creature through the heart, but that happens. And it's like, and then there's the facets of games where you can do horrible things, but you don't. It's not like you have to. This may or may not happen over the course of the game. You could or could possibly not do this, and I'm just. Games are so long and intricate where I'm like, if it's Last of Us Part 2 and you're like 14, I'm like, probably not. I mean, I don't know. That's a little mature, but not like in the Grand Theft Auto way. But, and these games are so popular and stuff. And like my aunt asked me because my little cousin, she's like 11 or 10. I don't know. She's small. And she plays Roblox religiously, and my aunt was telling me she was chatting with people and doing stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, like she's like, can you turn that off? And I'm like, no, not. I'm like, I mean, you might be able to, but if you do, then there's no point in playing Roblox.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, and so I was just wondering, as a parent or someone, like, how do you deal with those questions?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you don't to a certain extent, and then you have to pick your battles and come out with elegant solutions and just say, hey, no, I'm actually not going to let you go talk on the public voice chat of Roblox. I'm sorry, but no, I know who's on there. I've talked to them myself. No, you are not going to do that. So here is your own, family Discord where you can invite your friends, and as long as everyone stays cool in there, as long as I have control over who's in there, you guys can have all the conversations you want, but you guys hang out in here while you're playing Roblox. It's like you have to just take an interest and understand what's happening and create, for lack of a better word, safe spaces for them, because it is the Wild West out there in terms of multiplayer interactions, and then the violence and swearing, all that stuff. That's another conversation when it comes to like the game content itself, and that stuff is almost always like I'm less worried about that than other people, because a game is going to show you stuff. It's like when a swear word exists, it doesn't hurt anybody. When someone picks it up and uses it against someone else, then it's a problem. And that's how I feel about like even like violent content in games and stuff like that. It's like, okay, this game is showing you violent content. It's not actually trying to hurt you, the player. It's not trying to hurt you, the person. As soon as you go online and start talking to somebody, there's a very good chance that person's going to try to use words against you to hurt you. And that's a whole other thing that you have to deal with and recognize. And it's something you have to process, and you cannot process it when you are 12. Most people, when they're 36, cannot process it. So it's just so... it's such a different thing, but yeah, it's not something I'm not looking forward to having to deal with my two girls. But I'll figure it out and do my best, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and real quick, a funny story. And if you don't find this story funny, people, I'm gonna go ahead and apologize. But this story. So I was at my friend's house, and she has a son. He's 16. And he was like, yo, I'm so good at Smash. I'm so good at Smash. Oh, no one can hold me in Smash. And I'm like, all right, young buck. Let's see what you got. And I'm not saying he wasn't good. I've just been at this since the 64 days, and I'm not super pro nothing. But I made it past one round of Evo and Smash Brothers. So, and then I didn't make it past any other round. But so in my mind, I'm good enough. I can make it to the top 2,400 people. So yeah, go me. Yeah, that means nothing. Hey, if you're semi-pro, don't charge me in Smash. You're probably gonna rock me, but let me have my piece. So we're over there, and we're playing, and you do the insulting thing where you're just like, all right, I'm just gonna play with random and just to make it fair. And so his mom comes in and she's like, oh, this is Smash Brothers. Like, it was one of those things, I think she always knew what it was, but never just saw it. Now she's like, let me take an active interest. And so in this particular match, I'm Mario and he's Peach. It's like one of his his second main or something. And we're going at it and I'm just destroying him. And his mom is looking on horrified. And she's like, Mario is beating Peach? This is what I've been allowing you to play? And she bans the guy. I'm like, oh no, I'm sorry.
I actually just thought about that the other day. I don't know what I was doing, but it was just like, playing a game where something like Mario was just like kicking Peach in the head. I'm like, how's that not? Did I just miss that conversation, or did we just ignore that? It's like, okay, all right, fine. I'm not going to say a thing. I'm not going to be the one that gets everybody in trouble. But yeah, that's funny. But apparently you're going to get your dude in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just like, it never clicked to me, that I'm like, it's Smash Brothers. We've been doing this, and it's fun. And
they clap at the end. It's okay.
Yeah, it's and I'm thinking, I was like, is that what other things as a gamer am I removed from? Because we get it, quote unquote. But to my friend, all she saw was Mario beating Peach senseless.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Hey, that's the one thing I learned about games over the years. Is if I see a trailer or I see something or I see somebody else playing it, games can feel very different than when you actually are holding the controller and you have all of the context of what's happening. And it's just no, when you're playing, it just feels like you're smashing toys together. It's not. Yeah. It's not what you think it is. But standing back a little bit, it can look like, oh yeah, that's just a man beating his wife. It's like, oh no, oh God, what have we done here? Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So I don't know how big of a Batman guy you are, but it was Batman Day.
Yeah.
Dark Knight, generally loved by people of all facets. And we celebrated the Cape Crusader. He's done everything, and I I had this conversation, interestingly enough. We're not going to talk about Spider-Man, but me and my friend concluded that Spider-Man and Batman are so unique in the sense that they're probably the only two non-gaming characters that have always had a huge presence in gaming since basically the beginning. Like, beginning being like Super Nintendo, you know. Maybe well, I guess, no, there are arcade games about them. So yeah, maybe if we really want to push, you know, since the beginning, that those two IPs have, you know, always, and I could think maybe if I want to kind of think about maybe Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but not really. And, you know, before, you know, we talk about how great, you know, the Arkham games were and be like, oh, Batman. What do you think was unique about him that he's able to, he's withstood the test of time to where it's not like, okay, when, you know, they make certain games, like, you know, they're cashing in on an IP, a movie, or a property. But no, you know, Batman exists well enough to be like, if they're making a Batman game, it's because they just want to make a Batman game. You know, he's not tied to anything else that exists in his medium or world. And
Yeah, I think a big part of it is just it's an interesting character that you could do a lot with. He works well in video games. You know, he's not as perfect for a video game as like Wolverine, but for some reason he's had a lot more games. Like Wolverine's got the regenerating health and all this stuff, and it's like, yeah, you got claws, so you just do the melee combat. It just makes sense as a video game character. But Batman also makes a lot of sense with you know, his gadgets, and he's not invulnerable, so you can have a lot of grunts go up against him and not make it weird. Like, it makes sense. Okay, he's fighting a bunch of just regular criminals. Well, he's a regular guy too, so if he gets beat up and you actually lose there, that all fits. It doesn't feel odd, so it makes like encounter design pretty easy to figure out as a developer or whatever. And you know, when you look back at like the NES games, they leaned into that stuff and they leaned into the gadgets, and then you go down further in like the Renaissance with Arkham Asylum. Then they're just like, okay, now what else can this character be? And it's like, okay, well, he is a detective and he is trying to figure stuff out. Let's put him in something like a Metroidvania where he is just learning this space and he's figuring it out and he's getting more of his gadgets as you go along, and that's going to be the progression of the game. And that turns out that worked super well. It fits exactly with the character. I think that's the thing that really works. Is like he just makes so much sense as a video game character. And then also he's often hitting the right tone in terms of what people want from games, where it's like, yeah, it's kind of cool, and he's brooding and it's dark, and the you know, the characters he goes up against, all the villains are interesting, or at least they're fun and campy. So when you have a voice actor come in and they're overacting and they're just going for it, it works for those characters really well, and it like lights up the screen. And we see like other franchises sort of mimicking that, like in different ways, like Far Cry. Its whole formula is having a weird, strange bad guy that's going to light up the screen with like all their crazy ranting and stuff like that. Well, Batman sort of invented that stuff, so it's again, it just works really well as a video game. Arkham Asylum is still one of my favorite games of all time. It's such a great video game, and I'm looking forward to the next iteration of Batman. I know they're doing some stuff in the Batman universe coming up pretty soon with Suicide Squad and Gotham. What is it? Arkham All Stars or something like that. Gotham Knights. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, and it's like I want to continue to see like what they do with this universe and stuff like that. But then also I would like eventually to kind of circle back and just get another like Arkham Asylum 2, like exactly that.
It's like we don't need to reinvent the wheel, people here. We've already perfected. Let's just keep rolling.
Yeah. Yes, we did. That's a good game.
And you know, you said like, you touched on something I want to talk about. You know, like there's like Wolverine. There's so many other characters that like, you know, you would think that the comic book character space to video game would be such a seamless transition. Yet it has had challenges. I won't say it has failed, but you know, you get things on paper that should have been a home run, like, you know, the Marvel's Avengers game. You know, on paper you would think that would have been a home run, but it wasn't. And then you get things like, you know, you get all the X-Men games and all. It seemed once you left a beat 'em up genre, most of these games just could not succeed at all. But you know, with Batman, you know, just he has succeeded almost on all fronts, from fighting, beat 'em up, action adventure, puzzle, and I guess like say it's a credit to his world and his character. Being human really helps because like I said, once Superman games is like, okay, if I get beat by a regular dude, and what universe do I have to combo somebody as Superman? Unless they're like Darkseid or somebody.
It's really hard to make that stuff make sense for players, and I think for designers, it's a tough job that they often are like, we could figure this out, but it's going to take a lot of prototyping and a lot of testing and a lot of just ideas that don't pan out, and so it's gonna take a long time. And the Avengers game sort of tried to get around that by having some archetypes for what the characters are going to be and say, okay, well, we'll just like slightly shift what these characters are, but mostly like if you have a guy that flies is going to be this, or a person that swings, they're going to do this, or someone who shoots a melee weapon or a bow and arrow, they're going to feel like this for the most part. And yeah, but that can work. It just makes the game end up feeling a little bit flat, and people sort of can see that, and they reject something like the Avengers in the long run, even if like the story mode's pretty solid. When they go to try to play all these different characters and in this like ongoing mode, they're like, too samey. It's not really giving me that the Avengers vibe. And so like superhero games are tough. There's a couple of things that like they figured out. They've figured out Batman. They figured out Spider-Man swinging way back on a PlayStation 2 or 3 or whatever it was with the Spider-Man 2, and then they didn't do another one like that until Insomniac got a hold of it, and then they're like, all right, let's do another one like that, and that still works, it turns out. And they'll figure out probably a couple more now that superheroes are so popular, but it's still in many cases, like for something like Superman, relatively challenging.
Yeah, I think what they're gonna have to do, and I guess Batman and Spider-Man have the edge here because they kind of figured it out already. But they're going to have to break away from the notion that these characters have to be tied into whatever's going on in the comics or movies. They have to just be like, we're using the character and we're doing our own thing. Because I assume Insomniac's Wolverine is going to be its own unique story, and maybe that'll show people, assuming it's great. We all assume it is. We don't know, but we assume it is. That they're going to have to realize that when you're making a Superman game, you're gonna have to ignore the DECU. When you're making any Marvel property, you're gonna have to ignore anything that's going on in the movies. You're just gonna have to wipe your mind clean of that, and look to what, like with Batman. Like I said, they chose to do a Metroidvania style game because that made sense for the character, and it worked out phenomenally. And I think they're gonna have to look to be like, okay, we're making a Superman game. Well, how does Kratos work? Because he's a god amongst men, So we're going to have to take that formula of a character who is, literally godlike. But, we all played, God of War 2018, and we didn't feel gypped. We felt, it was able to still give you that feeling. And I think that's what they're going to have to do, that these people who take on these challenges, the developers, the studios, the publishers and all that they're going to have to be like, we can't look to the movie world for these titles. We just got to, completely ignore them to a certain degree.
I mean, I think this is going to be the big problem for Guardians of the Galaxy, where that game does feel like it is just trying to do exactly what the movies did without the movie license stuff. He's got the Walkman. Rocket has the same sort of accent as Bradley Cooper has in the movies. Everyone's looks kind of like the character they're supposed to, or the actor that they're played by, but not quite. It's in the they have the same sort of soundtrack where it's like, okay, we're gonna do pop music, like needle drops in the middle of the action and stuff like that. That's like a whole mechanic in the game. So it's like it doesn't feel like its own thing. It feels like it's trying to be the movie, but it's not the movie. They don't have that exact license, and they don't have like the character likenesses and all that stuff. So it ends up feeling off and like just a couple degrees iffy or whatever. And that that's in stark contrast to what you get from Spider-Man. From Insomniac, where it's like, we've had a ton of Spider-Man content and movies and films. Like there was a couple in a few years, and like very recently there was one right before that movie, right before that game, or right after, with like Into the Spider-Verse, and they just feel like they are concurrent things happening at the same time that don't have to conflict with one another or affect one another. It's just more cool Spider-Man stuff, and that's not what Guardians of the Galaxy feels like. It's not what the Avengers felt like, and it's just a strategy that is not working for a lot of superhero games.
Yeah, it's weird. I made this joke earlier at some point when I was talking to my friend. We have now returned back to bad licensed movie games era, which
Yeah.
that was kind of fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
But it's weird because I guess back then we knew what we were getting into, with the exception of Spider-Man 2. You knew you were gonna get some scenes from the movie, probably not, but like it was kind of like cheap fun. It's like seeing a parody movie. You know you're not about to see an Academy Award performance. You might, but
very good point.
Yeah.
Yes.
But now
it's really fine. It was totally it was fine. Like it was a lot of wasted effort on games that turned out to be a bad time. But you rent it and you have some fun memories of making fun of the game with some friends or whatever. I don't think we'll quite get back to that point. But it does. I get that sense from Guardians of the Galaxy where it's like giving me those vibes of, this feels like it is coming from that lineage of a company trying to make a licensed game on the cheap and doing its best, but not really having the budget because they did have to pay so much for the license to actually make that work. And yeah, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I kind of just want people to do their own thing, because if Kingdom Hearts has taught us anything, any crazy idea is possible. Like any,
yes.
If you're like, what if we took Iron Man and, he was a kid on a bike and I don't know, he fought Martians. That's just wild. But my point is, you don't got to be constricted to anything. You can just be like, hey, maybe the Adventures meet the Looney Tunes and that's Space Jam 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Make Space Jam 3 an RPG video game. There you go. A visual novel. Yeah.
Oh man, that we might have something there. We might have something there. But Jeff, I want to thank you so very much for joining me. I have fun. We got a lot deeper than I thought we was over the show, but hey man, this is what talking about games is about. It's fun,
Oh yeah.
You start and you just keep going and just a breadth of possibilities. But real quick, where can people follow you, keep up with you, see what you're doing?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, I guess, at Jeff Grub. I tweet too much is what I always tell people, so don't feel bad if after a day you're like, well, okay, this is, chill out. I have ADHD, I can't control it. All just comes spilling out of my brain. I got to get it out somewhere, so it all goes on Twitter. But I do post on there, if I'm going live on a podcast, or if I wrote something, or if I have some news to share, it'll be on there. It's a good place to go. Or the alternative is discord.gg/game mess, which I think that link is in my Twitter bio. So you could get that and come hang out in my Discord. We got a really good community. People are always talking there every single minute of the day. There's always conversations happening. Usually about games, but also about all kinds of stuff. So yeah, those are the best places to find me. And then from there, you can find all my other stuff. I appreciate having me on, Odell. This was a really fun conversation.
Oh man, I appreciate you joining me, man. I respect people's time. I know how busy and insane everything can be. So thank you, sir, again. And as always, you can follow me at Harmon Jr. You can follow the podcast at FC Podcast 23. And there's a Patreon. But remember, you can like, share, subscribe for free 99. Help support the channel wherever podcast is found. And if you do want to donate money, you can be like these cool people: Gabriel Cleveland, Ryan Frazier, Bake Rice, Rachel Coleman, Gabriel Garcia. And you can drop $1. It's only $5, people, to get a shout out. So, you know what I'm saying? Power to the people. Get the most out of your buck. But I thank you for joining us, taking the time out of your day. Make sure you hit that like button, leave a review, helps channel, all that usual good stuff. But as always, everyone, have a great week and be blessed.